Welcome to the masterclass portion of Polatschek's Advanced Studies for the Clarinet. Today we'll be going through Etude number 1 after Johann Sebastian Bach, a beautiful study that really captures the essence of one of the greatest composers in all of history. Now, as clarinetists, I think that we need to realize that our instrument was not invented until after the Baroque era, very end, early classical. So we are without the wealth of repertoire that many other wind instruments have available to them. That being said, I believe that this etude really provides a valuable opportunity to explore a genre that's not really presented to us most of the time. Now, since this is a study in Bach's writing written by Polatschek, I thought it'd be useful to give you a little bit of context before we start working on this and going through some general specific tips that can help you along the way. For Bach, melody, harmony, and counterpoint were so intricately intertwined that it became challenging to tell where one ended and the other began. This concept of melody was different than what it became by the beginning of the classical period. By then, compositions typically consisted of a melody, a bass line, and a harmony. For Bach, the distinction between melody, harmony, and the bass line was blurred. Now, while the melody was central to the composition in classical times and later the bass line was central in the Baroque era, Bach's melodies tended to be very dense, very carefully thought out, and his ability to create catchy melodic lines using counterpoint was exceptional. Now, regarding performance, the capacity for expression in the musical instruments of Bach's time was much more limited by today's standards. So composers like Bach really relied more on melody to convey expression than what we would normally see marked throughout our scores in the later eras. You're not going to see too many musical markings, and I think Polatschek does a good job of that. We really only have a tempo indication and a few dynamics, and that's it. So the rest is really up to us. Now, written in the key of E major, I think one of the most challenging aspects of this etude is the technical fluency that must be achieved to get through it. E major is definitely one of the more challenging keys on the clarinet. We use a lot of the pinkies. There's sometimes flipping, sliding, all that's covered throughout this etude. But this particular etude is outlined by a series of many scalar arpeggiated sequences. It's, like I said, deceivingly tricky, but definitely doable and rewarding to play. Like every new project, we want to start by setting our metronome to a tempo that allows us to play every single note correctly with all expressive markings and dynamics. By playing this study at a slow tempo, anything that you play, you will definitely be able to hear where the harmonic tension is being used between the upper and lower voices within the line. Especially with Bach's writing, oftentimes we have instances where there's a call and response technique used. So practicing slowly will really allow you to understand how to effectively shape each phrase, since Polatschek doesn't really include many dynamic or expressive markings as I just mentioned. Now, as a good rehearsal technique, a good rule of thumb, I would say as you're starting to learn this, never go faster than you can play the most difficult section clean. So if you can play the entire thing at 100, but the middle section is only at 70, that means that we have to keep working through the whole thing at 70 until that middle section can get bumped up to maybe 72 or faster. So really try to pace yourself in a way that's productive, efficient, intentional. Don't go too fast and take your time. You know, this is a good study in a key that we don't normally play in, so that's really the point of this. It's not so much the study of Bach, I think that's kind of secondary. To me, this is more studying technique and really understanding the lay of the instrument. So at the top of our page, we have an indication of allegro, leggero. That just means fast and light. Begin by thinking of the tempo you'd like to play before you start. Take a moment to hear the first phrase in your head, then begin. For me, I ended up playing this at maybe around quarter note equals 110, and really trying to feel the pulse in a really big one by the end of it. Really try to think of expansive lines, really try not to rush these 16 note passages that can become really monotonous and really relentless. I really tried to make sure in my recording that I added a few moments where I could take extra moments to breathe as well. I realized that in this study, there's not many places to breathe, so if you can circular breathe, that's awesome. Definitely do that. Or for a lot of us who can't circular breathe yet, I put a few extra breath marks in measures 12, 21, and 26 that can probably be helpful. I think for me, the biggest thing that I think about when I play a piece is making it sound good no matter what. So if that means taking out a 16th note to add an extra breath, or taking a little bit of time between, you know, two notes to give yourself a breather so it makes the rest of the music sound even better, then, you know, not taking that breath and just kind of going through it. I definitely say, you know, take some liberties in these etudes to make them sound the best possible that they can be. Now regarding fingerings, this is a really big pinky twister. You know, we have pinky usage maybe like every other note sometimes, I don't know. It can be a little daunting, but the thing I really want to stress is making sure that you plan out which pinky keys you're going to use. Mark all your fingerings, take some time to really go through the page, score study, and ensure that you know exactly what you're going to do before you start playing the clarinet. I think sometimes that we start playing something and we make mistakes that could have been avoided if we just spent maybe 10 minutes going through our score. I just want to point out that a lot of times in this we are going from right to left really quick, left to right, so unless you're going slow enough that you can really learn it without having to mark those things in, you're really going to want to have a blueprint and a good guide of reference as you're learning this slowly. You know, it really pays to have a plan, and I feel like it makes me worry less when I know exactly where my fingers need to go, and then I can focus more on actually creating the music. Now let's start working on the actual music. So in measure 11, beat 3, I would suggest using the 4 to B3 fingering so that we avoid flipping between the A sharp 3 that follows. Now you can use this in other instances throughout the book. If I'm pointing out something in this etude, there's a good chance it's going to come around later in this etude book or another piece you're working on. So just keep in mind, all the concepts that we're working on can definitely be applied to other instances and moments throughout all of your repertoire. So I think the point of any etude is to really feel like it's maybe like a homework sheet for the test, which would be a solo work that you're working on. So really take time to understand the concepts and the things that the composer of the method book has given you to work on. I think most of this is usually pretty intentional, so if there's a moment that's really difficult, it's probably there for a reason. Now in measure 12, we have an instance where we will need to slide between two pinky keys. As I mentioned earlier, there's sliding instances throughout this book. The first one occurs in this etude. Now this can sometimes present challenges since we are left with only one option for this note. On beat 2, we're going to need to slide from the right D sharp key to the right C sharp key so that we're able to play the B on the left and then the D sharp on the right. Now this, again, this is measure 12, and I also want to add that I added a small breath by taking out the second 16th note in that measure, first beat. So you can do that as well if you'd like to take a breath. That would really help me to get through it. I can circular breathe, but for everyone who can't yet, that's a really good place to take a breath. Now, going back to the sliding technique, if we were to try and play this beat going from D sharp on the right to C sharp on the left, to B on the right, we would then be unable to play the last D sharp since there is no alternate D sharp key. If you do have this alternate key, go ahead and use it so that both pinkies can alternate as usual. But for the purpose of this video, I decided to go ahead and use the slide option since many clarinetists are without this option. Now just to give you a very quick rundown of this, what I'm going to do is just put my pinky on the right on the D sharp E flat key, and I'm just going to slide it down just like so. It's almost like my pinky is just falling off the key down onto the C sharp key. I'm not using any extra tension, any extra weight. I'm just really trying to almost, flick the key, and then it's just kind of coming down onto the C sharp key. Things you want to avoid is using too much tension or weight. I think that can sometimes lock up our hand, and that can present problems because then our hand gets locked up, or you kind of miss the key, and then we fall behind in the music, and then we kind of need to stop and start again. So one really easy hack that you can use is just to get touch inside your nose. Your skin is naturally oily, so a really easy way is just to get some oil from your skin and put it on the key. Might be kind of gross, but it works. It's a hack that I learned from a teacher many years ago. Still works in 2020, so it's up to you whether or not you want to use it, but it works for me and I swear by it. So I would just do that. If anything else, practice this with a mirror. Make sure that you're doing this slow enough that you can really understand how to move your finger in a way that is efficient and you're not doing too much movement. Like any movement on the clarinet, we really want to think of efficient, intentional, small movements. That way our fingers can always stay close to the tone holes and the pinky keys. After the repeat, we now have modulated C sharp minor for a few bars. Same suggestions as before. Take some time to make sure that you know exactly where your fingers are going to go before you start. For me, I always try to consider the choices I'm making at a slow tempo and how they will remain consistent at a faster tempo. If there's a section that's troublesome from the get-go, think about some options that may be available as an alternative. 6 measures after the repeat, we have an F sharp 4 to an E sharp 4 on beat 1. Generally, I would suggest avoiding flipping between two fingers, but since we are playing a B sharp 4 on beat 2, this longer note will be much easier to play if we're already using the F sharp fingering that will be used after it. Now, playing the alternate F sharp 4 fingering using the bottom 2 side keys, I find that this option is a little more cumbersome at a faster tempo, just because instead of using the first finger alone, where we go to the B sharp, if I'm using the first finger, I can put my right hand over the tone holes as a prep. Not venting, but just keeping them over the tone holes to kind of, prepare for that longer note. If I'm using the 2 side keys with the chromatic F sharp fingering, I find this is a little more challenging just because I have to get my finger around the clarinet very quickly. Choice is yours to make. I just find that the first finger on the left hand is a little bit more easy to play because we can use the right hand as a prep as well. Now, based on the way that Bach would have written this during his time, this would have been a binary dance form piece. Because there are 2 repeats, the very last time around you would have been able to add some ornaments, maybe take some time. So in my own recording, I added a turn to the very end. On the very last note, I took some time on the last 2 measures, and that's about it. I also maybe played with the dynamics just a little bit more, took some time here and there, but the point is you really want to just be able to have some variety within the repetition. Don't feel like you have to play every single repetition the same way. We're going for really creating a beautiful line, not trying to render perfection at every single moment. So try your best not to micromanage this despite the technical hurdles, but the more technically that we play, I feel like the more lyrically we have to play. So maybe keep that in mind as you're working through this. And with that, we've reached the end of the first etude in Victor Polatschek's advanced studies for the clarinet. Having reached the end of this masterclass, I really hope you've gained a bit of knowledge and that it helps you prepare this music for a stellar performance in the future. In case you have any additional questions on this etude, please feel free to comment below. Send me an email, I'll get it back to you very soon. In the meantime, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time for etude number 2. Happy practicing, and don't forget to click subscribe on the way out. See ya.